Welcome to GONKCAST, an Autechre podcast. I'm Gabe.
I'm Dan.
And this is yet another bonus episode about your emails. Plus, we'll spend some time discussing Autechre's 2017 12-inch single, JNSN code GL16/spl47. Rolls right off the tongue. I've got to apologize once again for taking so long to respond to so many of your great emails. As I've said before, I read them all right away, and we always look forward to discussing them on air. But I also like to respond and say thank you to everybody, and I often let the backlog get overwhelmingly large. So please know how much we appreciate hearing your thoughts and how much better they make all of our episodes. Seriously, thanks so much for writing in, and do keep it up. Indeed, our next episode will be on the first two NTS sessions, but we want to start collecting opinions, interpretations, and hot takes on all four installments now. GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. Again, we want to know what you think about NTS sessions 1 through 4. Our email address is in the show notes of every episode, and it's GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. All right, Dan, what background info do we need to know about JNSN code GL16/spl47?
All right. Touched Music is a nonprofit UK label that specializes in electronic and ambient music. Their proceeds go to a variety of causes, but they seem to have a special relationship with Macmillan Cancer Support. Back in 2014, Autechre contributed the track spl47 to the second Touch compilation, which, by the way, has 254 tracks. And in 2016, they contributed JNSN code GL16 to the third compilation, which is even longer at 417 tracks. Then in 2017, Touched decided to bring these two tracks together for a 12-inch single limited to 1,000 copies. It's also available on streaming, but it's still overlooked by a lot of fans. It's only got 200 ratings on Rate Your Music, and it's currently sitting at a fairly unimpressive 3.18.
Yeah, I wonder if you had spend much time with this before and what you think of it.
I didn't know that they were from like a compilation. I remember when this got like released, it sort of came out of nowhere, and I downloaded it and checked it out. Listened to it a few times, but it just sort of was always one of those little extra things that I've never, that's not like I'm listening to this all the time or anything.
Yeah, I feel like I maybe listened to it once or twice when it first came out, and didn't think much of it since then. But it was really cool to revisit in the middle of our like incredibly deep dive into Autechre, because I would say that these are two pretty interesting tracks, and I would particularly say that the first track is quite fascinating. I mean, it's kind of like the lush, like the super lush synths that pop up on LSEC sometimes, and on XI sometimes, but like kind of stuttering in this bouncy way and kind of forming this sort of circular melody. And then what do you know, these like big, glorious, like dreamy amber style, pads kind of fill out the whole space and almost like slowly take over the track. And there's like a weird little coda with this kind of like warbly metallic clanging or something. But I mean, it's interesting because we talked about, oh my God, I'm going to forget the name now, Siptixed or something, like in our last listener email episode, which was also sort of a 2014 era outtake released on a Bleep compilation. And that was also like kind of strikingly pretty and melodic. And like listening to this one in particular, I was thinking like, are they just, kind of like saving all of the pretty stuff at this time in their career?
I mean, that's possible, Maybe they didn't think it fit on records, but, liked it enough to stick it on these comps. Also, maybe it's stuff that was made earlier that they've, tweaked more, or something. It's hard to say, and, we'll probably never know the answer. But, it is sort of strange, maybe happy coincidence or whatever, but that these, like, two, pretty tracks ended up on compilations.
Yeah, and on that note, I did kind of think a little bit about oversteps when listening to this track in particular, which, is obviously quite a few years before this one, which was on the 2016 compilation. But it does have that kind of like prettiness and, sort of a using melodic pieces to create sort of like a kind of a chill, rhythm. But it's just not very rhythmic in general. It's more of like a pretty melodic kind of piece in an oversteps fashion. The other track, spl47, I mean, it's got an obvious like relationship to SPL9 from XI, right? does that one strike you as like pretty different from the first track and more XI-ish?
Yeah, it's definitely more XI-ish. It's less pretty, more glitchy and kind of out there and stuff. It's okay. I think the first track is more interesting and enjoyable. This one just sort of seems like this one seems like an outtake or a throwaway kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. And it's weird because it's not like a ton of ratings on Rate Your Music, but it is rated higher at a 3.7 over 3.4, which is what the first track is on Rate Your Music. But it's, this one seems more like a throwaway. I think you can like kind of hear the DNA of SPL9, but that one is like much noisier and much more metallic and like kind of goes off the rails into like pretty pure noise territory at points. And this one kind of stays like in this, I don't know, it's almost got like a foot stomping quality to it. It's got like a lot of nice energy and kind of like these clipped glitches that form this kind of propulsive beat. But there's like just this weird kind of, I don't know, bubbling and gurgling to it. It really sounds like if you took that really noisy SPL9 from XI and you kind of just, I don't know, dunked it underwater or something like that. But it just kind of like goes and then stops, and it just feels like one little idea that was on the cutting room floor compared to the first track, which I think is really quite striking and to me feels like a hidden gem.
Yeah, I would agree. The second track like really has that cutting room floor quality. Like you say, it just sort of like happens, it doesn't seem like 100%, fully like fledged out or anything, like maybe SPL9 like is the fully fledged, version or whatever. But yeah, the first track definitely much more interesting in the sense that, it doesn't sound like a leftover from any particular record from the area or anything. Like you said, it sort of has like those hints of amber and hints of LSEC and everything. I think it's interesting in that sense, if nothing else.
Yeah, and so trying to place them, it's interesting because I feel like, I don't know, thinking about it, it's almost like SPL9 is the one track on XI that is like the biggest hint at AE Live and LSEC, It's like the noisiest and the glitchiest and everything. And this kind of like tones down SPL9, which is interesting. So maybe, I want to say it's got to be from the XI era, and, JNSN does feel a little later, just in the sense of like, even though it does have that oversteps quality, maybe it's like a little bit of the LSEC approach, especially like the way that it's not using a lot of reverb in the beginning. It's more of like these kind of strange, like kind of clanging, stuttering noises that are quite dry, but it all kind of comes together into something very like lush and dreamy, kind of like Easter off LSEC. But so the larger point is like, it doesn't feel like these tracks belong together to me, and I know it's not fair to judge them as like a single release because they were never meant to be, but do you think this works at all as like a single release?
I think it's nice to have like these two things accessible, since like you said, I don't think they were ever meant to like be judged together or anything. I'm sure it was basically just a fundraising attempt for these charities, and I think it's a good thing if they were just thrown on these compilations, especially since they have 200 something and 400 something tracks. Like they're gonna get lost like completely. Right. I don't know who else is even on there. Maybe somebody good, but this way they're at least like not lost. Maybe some charities made a little bit of money. So I think it's like a nice. Any time, like any sort of compilation release or anything, it's gonna just be for like the bigger fan, anyways. So I think it's like nice to make it just a little easier for the the bigger fan that wants to hear them.
I agree with that. I think it's worth seeking out. I feel like maybe a lot of people don't know that it is so easily accessible. It's just on streaming, so it's like totally worth your time to just sort of give it a listen. I feel like I said, the first track, JNSN Code, is really fascinating. I thought that Siptix track we talked about last time was really fascinating, and I kind of hope that they, of course every Autechre fan dreams this, but like they need to put out some compilation of all the Lucy's over the course of their career, like a a complement to the EP's box set. And while they're at it, they could go ahead and expand that EP's box set to include everything that's come out since then. But you know what I mean? Then maybe like people might, like their ears might perk up and they'd be like, oh, actually JNSN is really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely need to do something like that, because they really do have like so much cool stuff, that we've discovered. And even, I mean, there's been a few things that we had never even heard before, or, hadn't heard of even. And I just think that like, a compilation like that would be, really, really great. I mean, like you said, even if just reissuing that EP's box set, but expanded to include all, or or a part 2, or was the Beatles Past Masters kind of set. That's what we need.
Yeah, and then I do think some of these, like there's some of these tracks we've talked about that like they're just sort of meant to be like kind of hidden little things, but some of these I think would really shine if given like a proper spotlight in that way, and I feel like JNSN is one of those. But all right, let's move on to the emails of this week. First, I just want to read this neat story from listener Alex, who writes, in 2016, I quit my job in New York City and drove around the country for 2 months, mostly by myself, sleeping in a hammock, a tent, or my car, listening to basically nothing but Joanna Newsom and Autechre. I had this plan to disobey all the rules at the Grand Canyon, saying you shouldn't climb to the canyon floor and back in a single day, which probably would have killed me if I'd tried, but the day I had scheduled for it, the whole canyon was rained out and full of eerie, otherworldly fog. So instead, I drove around the rim for the whole day and just blasted LSEC while staring into the gray emptiness of the canyon. I was in a weird place mentally in tracks like C16 Deep Tread, Curved Caton, and especially Pendula HV Moda were the soundtrack to feeling like I was on an alien world. That's just so vividly written. I can like totally imagine LSEC, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, I've never seen the Grand Canyon in person, but it seems like it looks like Mars, which I guess I've never seen Mars in person either. So
yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, I feel like we've mentioned this before, but it's just like it's such a shame about doing this podcast during lockdown, because there are those like weird moments where you just happen to be in a weird place listening to something, and then it kind of like associates with it forever, and we're kind of missing out on that. But all right, what's next?
All right, listener Steve shared some thoughts on LSEC 5. Specifically, he praised every track, saying that they could all work as the score for a movie. They each create a certain mood and they blend into the background. He also said that he likes One but it's underwhelming as the closing piece for such a large work. If you consider all of LSEC 5 to be the closer, it feels more appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, we both felt like One was a pretty incredible closer to this whole thing. I mean, that's how I feel for sure. But I mean, I agree that LSEC 5 as a whole does kind of work as this like even better closer to the whole project in a weird way. I mean, we kind of mentioned how like the whole project is just sort of hinting at the kind of lushness and the more ambient side of things, and then it like really just slowly takes over the course of this last LSEC, which I think is just like perfectly executed. That being said, I thought it was sort of an interesting comment that made me think about, I don't know, what makes good ambient music, which for me is like, does it work both as background and in the foreground? You know what I mean? And I feel like LSEC 5 totally nails that, because it does really work nicely in the background, just because it is so like kind of dreamy and lush and everything. But also, if you zero in on it, there's so much going on. I mean, it's just interesting how so much of LSEC is like so skeletal and minimal, but this is just like I said, it's so dreamy. There's like so much to get lost in. You know what I mean? It seems to work on both sides.
Yeah, definitely. I think it does, and I think you're right. That is what makes good ambient music. Something that like can be background, but rewards deep listening. And LSEC 5 specifically, I think, really does fall into that.
Would you describe it as soundtracky?
Not really, but people always with instrumental music and ambient stuff, people always like kind of give it that moniker soundtracky, and so I'll say it annoys me a little bit. So maybe that's why I'll say no, but it might just be me being biased.
Yeah, I get that. Steve also wrote in with this correction. He writes, as I understand it, power electronics is noise with harsh vocals. Some of LSEC may verge on harsh noise, but it's not power electronics. Maybe some folks use the terms interchangeably, though I recall that's a regular distinction made on Noise Extra, a noise podcast I occasionally listen to. I looked it up and I'll be damned, Steve is right. It's funny because you and I, we've spent so much time like basically playing shows and attending shows in the sort of Central Florida noise scene. And, we saw a lot of music that's like self-described power electronics. And like thinking back, there was a lot of stuff that would have that kind of like screaming, harsh vocals mixed into it. You know what I mean? And I'm realizing now that maybe all the stuff that was described as power electronics did include the vocals. It's a shame because, so maybe what I mean more is like power noise, which is more of like an industrial kind of glitchy, like verging on harsh noise wall electronic music. But that term power electronics, I feel like it just like sums up the sound, like the feeling that I'm trying to describe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I didn't know that, but most of my power electronics knowledge does come from having to sit through it at shows that I'm playing. I didn't know that, but I do agree the term power electron. I mean, you're singling out the electronics. That doesn't make me think of the voice too much.
Yeah, and there's just something about like like that what's that like 4-hour long Pansonic record Kesto.
Kesto.
Like the really blasted noise stuff. I mean, it just makes me think of electronics. Like it makes me think of the electronic technology or whatever that's like malfunctioning or something to make that. I just feel like power electronics sums it up. But it's just funny to sort of remember like when we were attending these shows and you see some harsh noise, you see some power electronics, you go back to harsh noise, you go to this, to that. It's not that different at the end of the day, minus the vocals, I guess.
We're going to piss a lot of people off.
Yeah. All right, but touche. We'll call that power electronics gate.
There you go.
All right, what's next?
All right, listener Jordan says, you talked about LSEC 1 and 4 being the most fun, but I'm going to give LSEC 2 some love and say that it's a fun record also. The whole LSEC project has a very outer space vibe, and on ELYC6 onset, that vision is one of the strongest. It starts off calm, and on the second half gets more lively with the tempo picking up, and it creates such a strong sound world. There's a certain vision that I can kind of see. It's as if the piece started off relaxed somewhere in an intergalactic setting, where you're just passively watching things around you, and suddenly in the second half you're speeding up as if there's traveling through space at a high speed with the whooshing sounds adding to that action. The next track, Chimer, is danceable, percussive, and beat focused, which makes it a more fun track. It's a nice change from the previous track and works well for transitioning into the next track, C7B2, and that track is really fun. It's a track that you don't have to be patient with because it's a jam.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, I mean, if you could describe LSEC 2 as fun, and just thinking about this question, got me thinking, because I just feel like not a lot of people would call LSEC 2 fun. I mean, it's got the reputation for being the most like experimental LSEC, the hardest to get through, the most like electroacoustic indebted LSEC, and I don't know, just got me thinking about, how we talked about how XI is almost like the most brilliant part about it is this perfect balance it strikes between the experimental side and the like pure hip hop groove side of Autechre, like the academics and the b-boys are like both present on every track. And I started wondering if like maybe part of what is just slightly disappointing to me about LSEC is that it is no longer really striking that balance. Because for me, I feel like LX6 onset is almost like pure academic territory totally, and then Chimer is like the groove, and then we're back to pure academic with C7. You know what I mean? It's like there are a few tracks that are kind of doing both at the same time. Yeah,
you're right. XI really like struck that balance. I think on LSEC, you're right. Like the balance is throughout like different song. Like you said, like one song will be academic. One will be beat oriented. It's no longer like part of the same piece. Like I think it sometimes is on XI. So yeah, I don't know if I would call LSEC 2 fun. I definitely don't think it's the most fun of the set. But I guess depends on your definition of fun.
Yeah, I mean, and I think like Jordan's descriptions here are really really good. I could sort of like hear how he's hearing it. And that's why I made you read that whole super long thing. But here's more from listener Jordan. It says, on the topic of some Autechre tracks being funny, there's definitely some of that in LSEC too. The funny sounding squeaky synth pattern that kicks in the second half of LX6 onset, going up and down, and the funny beeping going on throughout until it gets even more ridiculous at the end, where it's just utter tomfoolery that sounds like retro video game sound effects. It's like when you go to the sound test in a video game and you just keep playing random sound effects. Keimer 151 has that screeching synth sound, which is kind of funny because it sounds like screaming. It has a ridiculously cartoonish vibe to it. I'm not sure we talked about this on the episode, but does LSEC have any of that sense of humor, that we sometimes like notice popping up on other releases?
I mean, I think the listeners, right, there are like some sounds I would describe as, video game-ish and stuff. Mm-hmm. And, definitely like some things that are kind of funny sounding. So, yeah, I mean, I guess there's some humor to it. I don't really think there's as much as, you know, maybe years past or records past that we've talked about. But, I don't think it's devoid of humor or anything.
Yeah, I just, think about like fun and humor. I was just sort of realizing that, there's something about LSEC that seems quite serious, actually. I think and quite academic for the most part, I
mean, I think when you have 4 hours of basically anything, it's going to turn academic and maybe lose some humor. I think there's a reason, most comedies are shorter films and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I just know that like. It seems like Autechre does lose a lot of people. I mean, they gain new people in this period, but they lose a lot of people too. And I feel like the people they're losing are the people that are kind of turned off by like the seriousness and the like intense experimentalism, of this of releases like LSEC. And I just feel like, to me, I like both. Look, I'm like one of those lucky people. All right, what's next?
All right, last comment from listener Jordan about the album versus film thing. I completely disagree with Dan's take. You're wrong already. An album can be like a movie where there's a clear destination, but not always. An album is typically more like an episodic TV show where many songs might share a certain vibe, sound palette, theme, or mood, just like how an episodic television show might have the same setting and characters but no deeper plot. Or an album can be like an anthology series where each song is its own thing. Many pop and hip-hop records are like this. I think of LSEC like a drama series where each part is another episode, and LSEC 5 is a conclusion that closes with one of them.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that I don't know if I could like stick with the episodic TV analogy, but I get what he's saying, which is that like you wouldn't have to listen to, you wouldn't have to see every episode to like understand, you know what I mean? You could sort of skip around. But I feel like in the music world, there can be stuff that doesn't have to like flow start to finish, but still all the pieces need to speak to each other. Like I feel like there are a lot of albums that they're not like, like building towards some clear destination, but stuff is playing off of each other and complementing each other and even like discording with each other and stuff like that. And it should all like build to some bigger whole. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like my other analogy is like a painting or something. I think of it more as like a piece of art, which I guess television can be, but that's a different podcast. It's like. You're right. You can enjoy some, in individual parts of it. You can not enjoy some others. And I think he's definitely right. That there's certain genres and stuff, like pop that really, are sort of that episodic TV show. You can like, one Cardi B song and you don't necessarily have to like the whole album or something,
Right.
And I think that's fair, but I think things like Autechre, things that we're looking at like academically, I feel like that's a big part of it, for me. Not everything has to be like a concept album, the Wall or some shit.
Right.
It just like it has to build to like something. Like the sum of the parts like should equal a greater whole, kind of thing.
Yeah,
like
it's not like a TV show. Like a TV show, I mean, generally doesn't get all dumped on you at once. And
no, exactly.
If it was, then every episode better have a reason for being there, or else you should have left it. You should have cut it. This is like one big thing that all comes out at once. And so, I think everything needs to belong there. Like, you know what I mean? So you don't have to listen to it in order or whatever. You can do whatever you want with it. You can have your favorites and all that stuff, but it's like, it still needs to create a larger piece, a bigger experience than you get on the individual song level for me. And I feel like LSEC does that. In fact, I feel like LSEC, we talked about it, surprisingly, works in a start to finish experience, weirdly.
Yeah, I mean, I think we determined that it works, best in that way, and piecing it out doesn't work as well. I mean, that's why we decided to do all 5, in one episode rather than split it or anything.
Well, here's a related comment from listener Choco Turnips, who calls LSEC his favorite Autechre album and writes, I think LSEC shows 21 of Autechre's most brilliant tracks to date and really seems to come off as Autechre just having fun with what they're doing, just releasing a mass of what sounds like loosely edited, if edited at all, jam sessions. I like how you can tell they still tried to arrange it like a proper album, what with how it progressively goes from its most chaotic and ridiculous tracks to material that almost sounds like Autechre revisiting the styles and themes of their earliest work in a very fresh, refined, and creative way. I meant to bring this up on the episode and totally forgot, but do you think that LSEC is kind of similar to EP7 in that it was supposed to sort of reject, traditional album requirements, but they just couldn't resist sequencing it into a larger statement? In fact, we talked about that on the EP7 episode, the quote from Sean where he's like, we called it an EP because we didn't want to have to like play by album rules. And then we talked about how they couldn't resist still making it like a big sequence, like a big statement in a weird way, a full experience. And they are talking about that in the context of LSEC. Like that's from an interview about LSEC, so like, does it seem like a similar thing? It was just supposed to be a big data dump, but they couldn't resist like piecing it together in some creative way.
I mean, that wouldn't surprise me at all. They seem like people who obviously, care about their art and stuff, and so I don't think that they would just dump things out, because even some of the big quad range and everything, it still is like sequenced well, and I think LSEC is definitely sequenced very well. I don't think that they're lazy enough really to just say do whatever, put it on shuffle, here's just all the files, have at it. I feel like if you're gonna do that, just stick the tracks in alphabetical order or something,
Yeah, give like some signal that you're supposed to just mix it up.
That is up to you.
Yeah, but it does feel like really to me like that explains like the weird, because we talked about how weird it is. Like why is it like in these perfectly, not quite perfectly, but like 45 to 50 minute chunks, and sometimes they don't really even make sense as a chunk, don't build to like some satisfying part, individual part. And I kind of feel like they just wanted to like release all this stuff. They selected like the batch of stuff they wanted to release. And some of those included like huge, almost 30-minute songs. And then they like couldn't resist sequencing it into like a digestible kind of experience with some logic to it. And that was almost like to the detriment of some parts of the album because, like we said, it's kind of beautifully sequenced from start to finish, but on the individual LSEC level, it's sometimes pretty weird. Yeah, exactly.
We talked about during the episode, it works much better, I think, as a complete piece. And so it is like sort of weird that they, broke it up to the, 1 through 5, but, maybe it was just not fully wanting to commit to a, 4-hour record or, not even wanting to scare people out of listening to it or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I just feel like the idea started as like, we don't have to follow the rules of an album. And then it was like this big mess of tracks. And they were like, you know what? It would probably work if we.
Yeah. Some of the rules are worthwhile.
Yeah. All right, what's next?
Yeah, listener Joe shared some info after our LSEC episode. He writes, I'm glad to hear that you liked my art gallery museum analogy. One interesting thing I wanted to point out, Dan mentioned that LSEC 1 sounds like the part you'd listen to in the lobby while buying tickets, and for a long time it was actually the only one you could listen to on Spotify. It seemed like it was exactly intended as that, a sort of taste of what the rest of the project sounds like to try to get you interested in buying tickets hits for the rest of the album.
That's pretty crazy, isn't it? Do you remember that? Because I like just vaguely do, but I was kind of like a late switch over to streaming, but do you remember that?
I was also, sort of a late switch over to streaming, so I don't 100% remember it, but just further proving how much of a genius I am.
I know, but it's really the only LSEC that you could do that with, because if you put any of the other ones on, you would get like a really wrong idea about what the whole thing is like. Only LSEC 1 works as like kind of the sampler play. I just thought that was really kind of mind-blowing. Joe also noted that, quote, Dan speculated over whether NTS was ever pressed on CD, and it was indeed, and has sold out long ago, whereas the individual session vinyls are still available to purchase almost 2 years later. So the more you know.
Yeah, well, good.
But not good because you can't buy it. Wanted to read this from Joe, who says, in regard to NTS, would you guys consider taking a longer break before the episode like you did for Christmas, so that both you and all of us have a bit more time to listen through it all again a few times to prepare ahead of time? I know this would be grueling for you too, but I would personally love it if you took some extra time ahead of the episodes, maybe even extra week or two, and then did a massive mega episode all at once in the same spirit of the album itself. Kind of just wanted to bring this up so that we can talk about how we are going to tackle NTS. I mean, we're going to do the first two on one episode next week. So you've got like one more week to, get prepared for that. And then we're going to do another episode 2 weeks after that of the last two. I mean, I feel like that is as far as we can stretch it without that's like spending a month on NTS. And for anybody who the NTS era is not their favorite era of Autechre, it's like, I feel bad for making them sit with it for, a month of GONKCAST episodes on it. But I feel like that's the best we can do at balancing, like giving everybody enough time to fully digest it, but not talk, droning on too long about it.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to listen to it right when it comes out. If you want to take some time, it'll be there when you're ready. But I mean, we did in an old podcast that we used to do. We actually covered NTS all in one 1 hour episode before. Yeah. So it can be done. We've done it.
Yeah. I mean, when it first came out, we did this on our previous podcast. It was kind of like the first testing ground of this podcast because we had so much fun just gushing about it.
Yeah.
But so we want to kind of do it a little different so that we can actually go into like more detail than we ever have before with it. But I guess I'll just say I believe in you guys. You guys can do it. 2 weeks per two NTS sessions. You can do it. Joe also writes, once you are done going through the discography and covering the other aspects that you wanted to cover, is there any chance you would consider continuing the podcast indefinitely? Even if it just came out monthly or even only a few times a year, I think people would still massively appreciate having it to look forward to. Like you've mentioned many times, there's endless amounts of things to talk about and discuss. Best transitions between songs, best beats, artists inspired by Autechre, their influences, song titles, ridiculous fan theories, etc. I totally understand if you want to end this after a while and move on to other projects, but you guys really are doing a great service to the AE fan community and creating something that could be enjoyed by people years later. First off, thank you for saying that. I mean, that's all we want to get out of this really is like if people enjoy listening to it, that's awesome. I feel like this is something that I would have liked to listen to, but it didn't exist. And so we just buckled up and made it. So that's always nice to hear. As far as what we're going to do next, I mean, we're probably going to milk it, right? We're going to go, we're going to talk about some of those interesting, once we're done with the discography, we'll do some of those weird ideas. I think that would be really fun. Yeah,
I'm definitely all for milking it. This is a lot of fun. I really do enjoy, Autechre, it's a niche of enough of a band that, it's got a small fan base, but there's enough people that, care enough to listen to a podcast and stuff. I have a lot of fun. I do a good amount of our twittering, and I have fun just chatting with people on there about stuff, and the email. I like doing these email episodes. It just it really is a fun little community kind of thing, because Autechre is also the sort of thing I don't know anybody in real life except for you that likes Autechre. Right. You know what I mean? So it's it's cool to have your little interest, and get to talk to, other people that have that same, crazy interest.
Yeah. And I mean, on that note, I think that's what we're going to be thinking about is how long would it actually be fun for people to listen to? That's how long we'll milk it. and I've kind of like had in the back of my mind, like, okay, maybe once we've like fully gone through Autechre and said everything that is fun to say about them, will we move on to another artist or something? And that creates challenges all its own, because I would want it to be something that like Autechre fans like also like, but somebody who has like, nobody quite has that kind of like level of consistency where every release is at least interesting, like usually great, but also interesting, even if it's not great,
Yeah, because that's the thing. We've done other, podcasts with just like random albums and stuff, and it's like it kind of sucks when you like have to listen to an album you don't enjoy, for 2 weeks or tons. Like when you have to like study a record you don't enjoy, it can be kind of a pain in the ass. Sometimes it's fun, but it could, at least with this odd, like there's been no time during this whole show where I've not looked forward to going to the next record, or right. Like it's always like I'm always, even the records I put it towards the bottom of my list and stuff, like I still enjoy listening to.
Yeah. And I kind of wanted to bring that up because like if you guys, the listeners, have ideas of like what's another artist that you love and you think all Autechre fans love and they have an interesting discography, worth taking a deep look at, email us and give us a heads up, gonkcastpod@gmail.com. The other wrinkle to that is both Dan and I have to find them interesting. So it's like not miserable for one of us and like pleasurable for the other one. But yeah, do send in your thoughts. All right, what's the next one? This is a pretty long one. You can pass it off to me if you get tired of reading.
All right. I'll see if I can make it. One more from listener Joe says, I almost fell out of my chair when, after hinting throughout the entire podcast at how much you love LSEC and then spending 2 solid hours fanboying over it, neither of you ranked it in your top 3, not even in the top 5 in my case, Dan's case. This gets at something I think you should clear up in the next bonus episode. How exactly do your rankings work? What do they actually mean? My friend and I always have 2 separate sets of rankings for music. One set is where we rank albums according to how objectively good we think they are, and the other set is where we rank our personal favorites. I figured that your rankings were more about what you personally enjoy, since Dan admitted that Untilted was well done, but ranked it lower because he just didn't enjoy the aesthetic. Maybe I misunderstood something, and what you were saying at the end was that you didn't enjoy LSEC as much as you thought you did anymore, but the sense I got going into the episode is that it has always been one of your go-to albums, and it didn't seem like much had changed up until the very end. I know that rankings are always going to be tricky and can't be done in any truly objective way, but can you clarify what consideration goes into your rankings? I did it.
Yeah, and I cut something else out that I wanted to leave in because you would have appreciated, but he used like the example of Bob Dylan. Dan's like the big Bob Dylan fanatic, but just as sort of like New Morning is like high on his list, but he knows it's not objectively like one of the highest Dylan, records and stuff like that. Totally get what he means. I mean, as far as how we are doing our rankings, I feel like it is pretty, we just sort of like recognize how silly rankings are, like sometimes listeners will write to us and say stuff like, they disagree with ranking like on principle, but they thought they'd give it a try because we've been giving it a try and stuff. And I don't know, I just totally sympathize with that it's like it's totally silly. But I guess what I'm trying to capture with my rankings is like a kind of definitive list for me. Like if I had to eliminate one Autechre album from existence, whichever one I would pick, that is my least favorite, my lowest ranked, and then I do it again until I get all the way up to number 1. You know what I mean? But I'm acknowledging, I think, that this is Gabe in the year 2020 and 2021, and my opinions will almost certainly change. You know what I mean?
Yeah, pretty much exactly how I feel. I realize that ranking is inherently, kind of silly, but I enjoy doing it. I like making lists at the end of the year each year. It's just sort of like a snapshot of that time, in your life or something, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I would say that, my ranking, the way I've been doing it is 100%, just my own, opinion. I mean, like I said, I've put some records lower, just, I can appreciate them. They're just maybe not like you said, if I had to get rid of some, like... Yeah,
like a personal desert island discs kind of an exercise.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's sort of the, list I would order I would get rid of them in or something. I guess to answer his questions about LSEC is I think I did think I enjoyed it maybe a little more. I was a little surprised with myself that it didn't make it to the top, and maybe it's just right now that's the way I feel or something. But I did sort of expect myself. I wish before we had done the podcast, we had just do a ranking, before listening to any of the albums, because it had been a while since I had listened to a few of them. So I sort of wish we had done that, but too late now. So I sort of thought I would have put it higher, but in revisiting, Try Repete and Chiastic Slide and stuff, I realized I do sort of, if I had to only listen to one, for the rest of my life or something, I think I would kind of stick with Try Repete or something,
Yeah, I mean,
I guess we should say too, our rankings aren't I don't think we've really switched anything around, but they're not set in stone. We could change something week to week, but I purposely don't really go back and listen to the. I focus just on the record we're doing. So
and we are gonna the plan is to kind of do a revisit, summing everything up and maybe revisit some things and make some changes and kind of come out with our quote unquote definitive list. But I mean, as far as LSEC goes, I thought that it could be number one when we were going into it, because it has that quality that we talked about in the episode where it's this kind of thing that you're totally impressed by, but you never feel like you fully have grasped it, because there's just too much to grasp. And so it had that kind of mystique for me. And then spending so much concentrated time with it, I just realized that it is by definition a mixed bag, and it excels at being a mixed bag with these incredibly high highs and these kind of weird, just nooks and crannies that sometimes I don't even know what to do, but just throw my hands up. But I kind of delight in that whole process as well. But it's just the albums that I have higher than it are ones that are for me, just killing on every single second of it, and LSEC is just not that. So, maybe it's not that we'll obviously get to talk about NTS pretty soon here. And I don't want to spoil anything, but it's that also has the mixed bag quality, but to me, it's kind of killing it at a much higher ratio is all I'll say for now. All right. Last one from listener Tom, who says, I'm sure you've addressed this topic here and there, but in soaking in Sign and Plus lately, I've read a few reviews and discussions where inevitably someone pines for the good old days of Amber. Can we collectively knock this shit off? One generally wouldn't expect a Michelin star chef to make a grilled cheese. Not that they couldn't, not that their version of it wouldn't blow your damn mind, but once a broader world of ingredients and cookware and techniques are at their disposal, they ain't making a fucking grilled cheese for you and your palate. Tom also adds, it's been over 25 years since Amber, and I've listened to it loads since the 90s, and I don't care if it's their best stuff by some shitball yardstick. For a group making music this weird to still be around and dumping so much music out there, it's ridiculous that there's a chorus of, well, I prefer their early stuff every single damn time they put something out. Move on. If one likes the stuff from 94 better than what followed, then fucking have at it, but please try to do so without yammering about it any chance you get. I sympathize, but I feel I'm so deep into it that I don't, I spend so much time on these dedicated forums and things where nobody would say their early stuff is better. Nobody would have that kind of casual attitude about it, so I just am not as annoyed by this.
Same kind of thing. Our Twitter account and Reddit and stuff is so entranced in deeply in the community that people don't say this as much, but I do definitely sympathize with him. It is annoying. I mean, not even with Autechre, but any band, it's just if you like the early stuff, it exists still. Go listen to it. You don't have to listen to, just because a band, releases a bad album or something, just don't listen to that one. Or, if you don't like anything past, this year, don't fucking listen to it. I do, I could see being disappointed, when a band, starts sucking, I like Modest Mouse, but I think they've sucked for quite a while now. But here's the thing, I don't listen to anything after Good News, because it sucks.
I mean, at the same time, I get the disappointment, like you were saying, in that, and I also get because when I put on early Autechre, Amber or something, it gives me this weird warm like nostalgic feeling, and it's not just for the record, but for like that whole era, everything about the 90s electronic music. And it gives you like this weird feeling that, I don't know, it's going to sound stupid and obvious, but like when you watch an old movie or something, you see like young Harrison Ford, for example, and you're like, God, he was so fucking cool. And you like wish he could somehow be made young again and make more movies as him, because like every, couple of years there's somebody is like called like the next Harrison Ford or something, but nobody's ever going to be Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford is never going to be Harrison Ford again. No matter how good the stuff he does, there's just something about like that early era that is like so, I don't know, warm and nostalgic or something. And I get the disappointment that it's never coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good analogy, But the difference is, Harrison Ford's making Indiana Jones 5, and it sucks. And Autechre's making something different that's still good,
So that makes people feel like, why couldn't they just go back to it? Because they think like it's more of a possibility, you know what I mean? Because like they seem so talented.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like
Weezer
or something where they just have lost it. I get that, but I think it's just I think that's more of a reason for Autechre not to go back. If Autechre released an album that sounded a lot like Amber, tomorrow, I'd be disappointed, because why take that step back? If it was, some sort of like, undiscovered, unreleased, thing that we're, releasing now, recorded back then, like, okay, fine, I'd love to have that, but a newly like recorded thing today that sounded like something old, that's not really what I want Autechre for. I like the experimentation and the like, constant moving forward that you get. None of these records, that we've talked about, like really sound exactly like the one before it or the one after it or anything like that. They're all sort of, you could tell they're from the same artists maybe, but they don't sound the same. And I think that, that's what makes it so interesting to go through these, so many records.
Yeah. Because there would just be like lesser Ambers or something, basically.
No, exactly. Yeah, that's the thing.
Tom also writes, if that wasn't inflammatory enough, here's a hot take. Huge Chrome Cylinder Box Unfolding by Venetian Snares is the best non-AE but kind of sounds like it could be album anyone else has ever produced. And it's better than Amber, but not Confield. How's about that? I know that you're big into Venetian Snares. I have only listened like a fraction of his pretty overwhelming discography. And I threw this one on, Huge Chrome Cylinder Box Unfolding, after reading this email. I got to say, it sounded awesome to me. Maybe probably not better than Amber, but it sounded pretty good. I mean, do you know this one? What do you think of it?
It's definitely not better than Amber. I'll say that. But yeah, this is a good record. Venetian Snares, I am a fan. He does have like a shit ton of records, and they vary in quality. I also feel like a lot of, his more breakcore stuff, you got to be in the mood for something so like frantic and all. This record, Huge Chrome Cylinder Box Unfolding, it is a little more like glitchy and stuff, and it maybe a little easier listening and stuff. So it definitely is like a highlight from his. I love songs about my cats, but this is one of probably top 5 of his for me. Yeah.
So thank you, Tom, for the rec, and another entirely too long listener email episode in the books.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you've got any Autechre opinions or hot takes you want to share, we want to hear them. GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. Next episode in a week. NTS sessions 1 and 2, with the other 2 coming after that. Again, send us your thoughts. GONKCASTpod@gmail.com. If you like the show, help us out. Subscribe. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Look us up on YouTube. Stay connected. Twitter, Instagram. Both of those are @GONKCASTpod. And we'll see you next time.
See ya.